Hi guys, here's a short introduction how to use the program and for what you have to pay attention for. So first of all, we have to install it, of course, and you can find in your downloads area two files. So one is for Windows and the other is for Mac. Here I use Windows, so I click on this one. And then we install it like every other program. So here I click on next, next, and I can also create a desktop shortcut and install it. And then we click on finish. If you should get a warning that Apple can't verify the program after you've installed it, then just go to the help button here and open the privacy and security settings. And here you can click on done. And then here you can click on open anyway. And here again, and type a password in. And here we go. And you only have to do this once after the installation. And if you installed and started the program, you will see this interface here. And first of all, I would go to the defaults, and here are some settings you can change. So first of all, we have the improved images. And these are basically the images that are upscaled or interpolated. And you can now either decide if you want to have an extra folder for them, or if you want to save them also in the main folder. So this would mean you would override the images in the main folder. So basically the images that are in the render output. So normally I would leave it to an extra folder so that you still have your original renders. And then you can also set a specific suffix for the extra folder. Then you can also change the default version because the program is able to render different files with different Blender versions if you want. And here, for example, I mainly render with Blender 4, so I still use this one. But I can also change it later for every file separately if I want. And here are the different paths to the different Blender versions. So keep in mind, if you're using Blender 5.2, for example, then you have to change the Blender 5 path to Blender 5.2 also. And then we come to the additional support of Turbo Render and SceneBoost. So if you have installed one of these add-ons, you just have to check these checkboxes here, and then it will also support the functions from these add-ons. So for Turbo Tools, it can use the denoising and also the temporal denoising function. And with SceneBoost, you can have all of these proxy LOD functions. And if you activate Turbo Render, you will see this additional checkbox here. And this is very important if you want to use the temporal stabilization in combination with interpolation if you have a corrected step enabled. But it also is described here. But more to it later. Now we click on OK and go to the Userpref. And normally I wouldn't change something here. So this would be only important if you want to have a specific Userpref for rendering. For example, if you want to have only specific add-ons enabled for rendering, then you could change it to other and set a specific path here to another Userpref. So just to show you how you can do it, you first have to go to the folder where the Userpref is stored. And normally, so under Windows, for example, this is under App Data, Roaming, Blender Foundation, Blender, your Blender version, and then Config. And here you can see the Userpref. And what is now important, you have to save it somewhere that isn't exactly in this folder. So for example, I could create another folder and I could name it however I want. So test, for example, and then I copy it here. And then I can go into Blender to the preferences. And now I could deactivate what I want or also change the system settings here. And then I just click on Save Preferences. And then I have my new Userpref saved here. And then you can take this file here and save it somewhere on your drive. And it doesn't matter where it's saved. The only important thing is that it isn't exactly saved here in the config folder. So just move it somewhere else. Here, for example, I moved it to this folder. So if you have copied it to the folder you want, you can delete it here and then put back the old Userpref. So like this, and then you can also delete the folder here. And that's basically all. So it's kind of an advanced topic you normally don't need, but if you should, you have the option in the program to use a specific Userpref. Then we come to the Models tab, and here you can install the Upscaling and Interpolation function with just one click. They aren't installed by default because you don't necessarily need them, so the program also works without it. But yeah, normally I would install it, of course. And I also made it this way because then you can also easily update them later. So if you haven't installed them, then as you can see, if I click on these functions, they are deactivated. So I click on Models and then just click on Install. Then here we click on OK. Okay, and then we also install the interpolation function. And here we go. To the web and presets function we come later, because now we will add our first files. So I select all files I want to render and then I click on open. And then as you can see, all files are loaded directly with the correct settings from the blend files. So I can also open it here to see more settings, and everything is already set here, like it's set in the file. And this is very cool because you can leave it like it is, or you can easily change it to whatever you want. And you can also change the Blender version if you want to render it with another Blender version, or if you have several scenes, cameras, or view layers in the file, you can also select specific ones here. And then we also have the samples, the engine, the format, the resolution, and the frame rate you can change. Beside that, you can also change the output path, of course. And here we have a crocket for the output settings. And this is only important if you have several scenes, cameras, or view layers in your file, because then the program can create separate folders and subfolders for them. But now I leave it as it is. And last but not least, we have this field where you can decide if you just want to render the file, or if you want to stabilize it, or if you want to have both. So if you want to render it first and then have the stabilization afterwards, or you can also change it to none if you have already rendered the file, because then you can also upscale or interpolate it afterwards without rendering. But keep in mind, you can use the stabilization function only if you have Turbo Tools installed and activated it here in the defaults. The same goes for the render mode, because this is only available if you have SceneBoost installed and activated it here in the program. Because then you can switch between the final rendering and the preview rendering. So exactly like you know it from SceneBoost from the Blender interface, where you can create faster preview renders with lower LOD levels and fewer samples and so on. But also the final rendering then has all these advantages of the proxies and other functions, of course. So if you have a lot of VRAM and performance problems, then you can check it out. But now let's go back to render. And here you can see all tasks the program will perform. So currently it will only render the files, but if I now activate the upscaling, for example, then you can see it will do the rendering plus the upscaling afterwards. And what are the different settings here meaning? So basically you can upscale your images with a factor of 2 or 4, and 0% of the original means that the improved image will be 100% the upscaled image. And a factor of 25, for example, means that the original image will be mixed with the upscaled image with a factor of 22. And this is a common procedure many professional upscaling softwares are doing because it gives the images kind of naturalness back without losing too much detail. So for now, I select a factor of 2 with 20% of the original. Then let's also activate the interpolation, and here you can also choose between a factor of 2 and 4, and the difference between original step and corrected step means that if you're using the original step, the program will render every frame like it said in the blend file, but if you're using the corrected step with a factor of 2, for example, the program will automatically render only every second frame because it interpolates the frames in between so that you have the same amount of frames at the end. So basically, for you to know is that if you want to have slow motion, then you have to choose this one, and if you want to have the same amount of frames but just want to use the interpolation so that it's faster and that you don't have to render every frame, then you have to use the corrected step. So I use the corrected step here also with a factor of 2. And here you can define if you want to pause between the jobs and if you want to shut down the PC after everything is done or after a specific time. And you can also check both, and then it depends on what happens earlier. But for now we set it to no shutdown and we click on start. In the current frame field, you now also see a second number in the brackets, and this is a bit confusing because you will only see this if you have activated the experimental mode for turbo render in the defaults, because then it uses time stretching instead of rendering every second or fourth frame if you are using the interpolation with the corrected step. And that means it renders every frame, but the animation is faster. So the second frame is like the fourth frame and so on. So in the brackets, you see the number it actually renders, and before it, you see the number it would normally be if you would render with steps. I know that's maybe a bit confusing with the time stretching, but you don't have to overthink it too much because the program does everything automatically and you can just concentrate on the first number to see how far it is. And the cool thing is I can just click on the different files and see the preview directly here and also the job time. And if I now click on the image, then it automatically creates the preview proxies and I can play the animation directly here in this field. So regardless of the output resolution, you can always see your animation here in real time in the frame rate you have set, because the program automatically downscales the images if they are too big for the preview. And the proxies are automatically deleted if you remove the proxies here, so you don't have to do anything. And here we can see all files it has rendered and everything worked correctly. It saved it under the right output folders. And here with the suffix improved, we have the improved images that are upscaled and interpolated. So just to show you, if I go here to the details, we see the pixels, and then we also see here 20 frames. And here we see 40 frames because of the interpolation, and we can also see under the details the higher resolution. If you now want to use the stabilization function from Turbo Render, then it's very important that you have set up the file correctly. So here in Blender, first of all, it's important that Turbo Render is enabled, of course, and you don't have to specify an extra scene cage folder like you normally do, because the program does this automatically. And then you also have to make sure that motion blur is deactivated so that Blender can create the vector data. And don't worry, we can add motion blur also in the compositor instead. We can just add a vector blur node here, and put it in between. And then I connect the depth with Z and vector with speed. And here we go. We can also crank up the samples a bit. Yeah. And then we can set it here to also stabilization and just click on start and everything will work automatically. And here we go. So it has also stabilized it directly after the rendering and then has also done the upscaling and interpolation on top of it. Here's an example of a file where I have different scenes, cameras, and view layers. So I can now either select specific ones or say that it should render everything. And here in the output settings, I would normally leave it to create only needed subfolders because then it always creates a subfolder for every scene, camera, or view layer if it's needed. And yeah, that's basically all. So I now just click on start. And it's finished. And the cool thing is you can now switch between the different shots directly here in the preview field. And you also see here in the job title, which shot is it at the moment. And also the job time and the frame range, of course. And if you click on a shot, then it will be played. Then let's go to the web function, because if it's activated, you can also see your rendering progress on your smartphone, tablet, or every device you want, as long as it's in the same network as your PC. So basically, here is the IP address of your PC, and here is the port you need. And you only have to type this URL on every device you want, and then you can also see your progress there. So I just typed the URL directly in the browser, and now I can see all jobs that are currently added. And I can see also the status in real time. So here I can click on expand, and then I can also see the current render and also the other informations. Then I could just add the URL to the home screen like this. And now it's even like an extra app. So I just click on it and I'm directly here. And after that, we also have the presets function. And here you can very easily save all the settings from the currently selected job you want to save. So I just click on presets. And then, for example, I check start and version and also samples, engine, and format. And the other things I leave unchecked. So it will only save these settings here from the currently selected job and will also only override these settings on the files I apply this preset. So I click on save current settings as preset and then I can type a name, test for example, and click on OK. And now, like here for example, we have completely other settings. And then I can just go to presets and click on test. And then as you can see, I get the settings here I have saved earlier. What's important to know is that if you select a preset here, it's applied to all files that are currently in the jobs list. And then we come to another very cool and important feature of this program. Because if you are rendering something with cycles, you can also switch to cycles auto. And then the program analyzes your scene before rendering and can adjust all the render settings for you, like light bounces, volume steps, transparent settings, and so on, to make your renders faster without losing quality. Because it can set all these settings depending on your scene. scene. So for example, I have the identical shot here that I'm rendering twice, and on the second one I changed the engine to Cycles Auto, and on the first one I leave it to the standard cycle settings, and now let's see what happens. And if we now compare the job time with the first one, then you can see it's way faster, so it can make a big difference even on simple files. And just to show you, here's the rendered image with the normal cycle settings, and here's the one rendered with Cycles Auto, and you can really tell no difference. And another cool feature is that you can also do viewport renders directly with this program for your storyboards or whatever. So you just have to go to Engine, and then you can also choose between Eevee viewport or Workbench viewport. And the program then does only activate the objects for the render that are also activated in the viewport. And it also uses simplified shaders and also deactivates the lights and so on. So basically that it's the same like in the material preview in the viewport without the lightning and so on activated. So I just click on start. And here we go. And last but not least, I also want to show you the info section, because here you can come to the tutorial at any time very easily, and here are also some general information staying. And here are also links to the 2 additional add-ons, SceneBoost and Turbo Tools, if you are interested. So that was it. I hope you liked it and that the program can really help you and save you a lot of time. And then I see you next time.